Not the best game to go into the break with, but things are still looking good in the big picture. We'll talk about the loss to Pittsburgh, what we're looking at in terms of the standings, and also what the Sabres need to be thinking about pertaining to the trade deadline. Coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to this Friday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. You can watch our show on YouTube. If you are watching along, you might see that my dog Finn has decided to join the show for the beginning here. He probably won't last very long. Lot to get to on today's show. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. You can also get into our Locked On Sabres Everydayers Club. We'll talk a lot of Olympics in our Discord. If you're not in our Discord and you want access, or you also want ad-free versions of the show, head over to lockedonsabres.supercast.com. Sneaky Joe DiBiase, we got a game to talk about against the Penguins. We have got Olympics to talk about coming up soon, as we have a couple of days until now and the tournament beginning on Wednesday. And also, we'll get to the big picture, and that includes the trade deadline. Some brief thoughts from me on the deadline today that'll kind of set up our next few episodes on specifically who I think the Sabres need to be targeting. I've got a couple of players in mind. Today, a little bit more about the concepts for the types of players I think the Sabres could really use. And I think this game against the Penguins kind of emphasize some of the things that I think that they do need. So we'll talk about it all coming up on today's show. The Sabres fall 5-2 to the Penguins. They are now off until February 25th. And I think because they've lost 3 of 4, fans went from, I don't want the break, I want them to just keep rolling, momentum, keep going. And also you're enjoying the games, right, on a night-to-night basis. Then they go and lose 3 of 4, and guys are getting injured. It's, okay, we need the break. Give me the break, please. The break, I would say, because of the last week, has come at a pretty nice time. I was hoping the Sabres would sit at 7 points, 8 points clear of the playoffs going into it, and instead they sit 5 points clear. However, those are 2 Metro teams, 7 points above Ottawa, who is the next closest Atlantic team. So standings still look good, but we'll talk about the odds and how all that really looks in detail coming up in a little bit. Sabres losing this game, though, to the Penguins. Home game, you're playing Pittsburgh. That's a good team. The Sabres were favored yesterday. I thought they were favored for a good reason, and I don't think they really put out their best effort going into the break, and that is a bit disappointing, especially when you get a goal that, let's be honest, the Jason Zucker goal early in the game, 2 minutes in, not even 2 minutes in, 1:46 into the game, that shot should not go in. It maybe takes a little bit of a deflection. It's a wrist shot without traffic in front from an okay angle. He's a good goal scorer, but he is not Tage Thompson ripping, clappers past goalies. It's a shot that you want your goaltender to save. And Silvos had a lot of good saves throughout the night. That was not a great start, though, for him. So you're favored. You're at home. You're out to a 1-0 lead. I had great confidence that they were going to have a night after seeing that start. Avery Hayes? Avery Hayes. Who is Avery Hayes? Now, if you pay really close attention to all the offseason stuff that the Sabres do and the prospects tournament that they do against the Penguins prospects and the Devils prospects and a few of these other teams during the summer, Avery Hayes was amazing in that tournament for Pittsburgh. He is not a high-profile prospect. He was not drafted. His story is kind of cool, right? Like, he was an OHL guy that was good, but never really flashed some elite talent. He wasn't that big. Then he goes to the AHL, nothing in year 1. And then 2 years in a row, the last 2 years, all right, pretty good in the AHL. He gets his call up for the Penguins yesterday, and in his first NHL game, he scores twice on the Buffalo Sabres. So tough pill to swallow there. A guy who has never played before in the league and isn't like somebody's best prospect. He just flies in and has a couple of goals. A nice goal off a great pass from Anthony Mantha at the side of the net that beat Alex Lyon, and Hayes beat Tage Thompson to the right angle, to the right spot, and that gave Pittsburgh the lead going into the first intermission. And then Ben Kindle, who is a top prospect. He was a first-round pick, I think 12th overall, 18 years old. He's having a decent rookie year. On that goal in the second, that's when, I felt good even when the Sabres weren't playing at their best, all the way up to that goal in the middle of the second period. And a guy that made a mistake on a goal earlier in the game and got benched after this happened, Jacob Bryson. I have not minded Jacob Bryson this year. I think he's been okay. I think if he's playing 12 to 15 minutes on your third pair, you can get away with that. But he definitely is not a guy that I think you want in the lineup every night. He certainly isn't anybody that can play a bigger role. And he is one of these guys that he's such a low-level player that has been here so long that can cause frustration with a player. And to keep into perspective how long Jacob Bryson has been here, amazingly, this is his 6th season with the Buffalo Sabres. I had to double check that when I saw it tweeted out, that it's his 6th season with the Sabres. He played during the COVID year for this team. Like, he played with Jack Eichel. How many guys other than Dahlin and Tage have played with Jack Eichel? Just Jacob Bryson? I mean, his first NHL game for the Sabres is February 23rd of 2021. The guys who scored in that game for the Sabres, Victor Olofsson, Rasmus Asplund, Dylan Cousins, Cody Eakin. Assists in that game were by Dahlin, Reinhart, Eichel, Taylor Hall, Eric Stahl, Kyle Okposo. The guy's been here a long time, and I don't hate him as a player. I just don't feel the need for him, and I hope they would upgrade over him. Long story short, to go through the background here, that play on the Ben Kindle goal, Bryson blows a tire trying to turn backwards near the blue line in the offensive zone, falls, turns it over, 2-on-1 back the other way, and Kindle beats Lyon. I don't know what Bryson is trying to do on this play. It almost reminded me of the Krebs mistake in overtime from the game prior. What's your plan on this mistake? That's what I asked of Krebs when he stayed up in the zone when Tuck was in front of him to get the chance. There was no upside to the play. Bryson, that would be my question. What was the plan? You're turning back to the blue line. Where are you going? Because the other point man is covered, and you have, unless you're skating back into your own neutral zone, you're either going to fall or you're going to get shoved off the puck by Kindle and turn it over, and it's going to go back in an odd man rush. You are risking an odd man rush to a great degree because of that turn. It just made no sense to me. And Lindy obviously agreed because I don't think Bryson really saw the ice after that. He only played on the game 4 minutes and 19 seconds. So I do think that was it for him. Michael Kesselring also on the ice for both of those 2 goals early, and he is struggling a lot as well. I want to talk about those 2 a little bit more, though, when we talk about what they need, because I think Kesselring, Bryson are a part of one of the littler problems that this team has, and I think it's defensemen in their depths that I don't know how much you can really trust right now. So you get down 3-1. They made me think they were going to fight their way back for a minute there. Tage on the power play early in the third period, but that was it. And Tommy Novak closes it out 4-2. Statistically, not the best night for the Buffalo Sabres. They also, though, weren't terrible. They were outshot, but it was 32-28. Scoring chances in this game were at 5-on-5, 25-22 in favor of Pittsburgh. Not that far off. The Sabres had more shot attempts, 41-39. High danger chances were 8-7. I mean, expected goals, the Penguins were at 2.8. The Sabres were at 2.2. You really don't get the widening gap until you get to including the man advantage, because Pittsburgh, far more dangerous on the power play, which isn't a surprise. They have the 3rd best power play in the league. They looked like it. And the Sabres, with ranking 16th now in the league on the power play, looked like a team that I thought was even worse than that. They did get the goal, but when you include all situations, 5.6 expected goals for Pittsburgh, 3.4 for Buffalo. And that power play in the second period, the Sabres might have set the record for the most denied zone entries that I've ever seen. I counted 7 times that they tried to enter the zone and couldn't do it. It was brutal. They were getting boos, and I think that, by the way, can affect the team. Like when you're on the man advantage and your crowd is getting restless because you can't even get into the zone, I mean, frustration starts to build there. And to fast forward in terms of frustration to the end of the game, once the empty netter goes in, Rasmus Dahlin, I thought he hurt himself. He was without a stick, flying back, trying to prevent a goal, slides towards the net. His foot hits the post, and then it looked like he kicked the post. And then he went to the bench, slammed the door, kicked the boards in front of him. I mean, Dahlin was mad that they lost that game. I'm sure he wanted, as the captain, a better result going into the break to feel better about, but he now heads to the Olympics. So overall, not a great taste in your mouth going into the Olympic break as they fall 5-2. But big picture, I still feel pretty good about things, and I'll get to that when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. Super Bowl 60. And FanDuel's making sure that you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you are backing the favorite, whether you are feeling the underdog. I'm sure a lot of my listeners are not really hoping the underdog wins this game. Or maybe you're just building one last same game parlay. It's a game everyone's been waiting for. It's where your prediction can turn into plays, stats, and storylines, and every snap will feel bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from the kickoff to the final whistle. If you are a new customer, bet just $5, get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so the Buffalo Sabres fall to Pittsburgh 5-2, 32, 19, and 6. They head into the Olympic break. The reason why I'm not in panic mode, like we had a caller on WGR early in the morning during the 6 o'clock hour, and he had the attitude of, it's all over. They're going to miss. This is a problem. And I just looked at that and thought, there aren't really people that are thinking this right now, are they? Like, I know being disappointed about last night's game and the last 3 losses in this 4-game stretch are worthy of being annoyed by. But let's put it all into perspective here. They are still in really good shape. They could have been in better shape, right? I mean, because of where they are at and the fact they're in the lead, I am not as much looking at how many points you've gained as much. I'm starting to look at how many points did you give away? And you go on a 5-game win streak, you gave away 0 points. Beautiful. The opportunity for 0 points. 4-game stretch, you gave away 5 of possible 8. And that can't happen in 5-game stretches, or they will start to fall out. They are still, though, sitting with a 5-point cushion over the Blue Jackets and over the Capitals. And that is not speaking of they are 1 point ahead still of Boston. And they have the tiebreaker on almost everybody. Not Boston, but pretty much everybody else. So Columbus to catch you, Washington to catch you, they've got to catch you, and either the Islanders or the Penguins need to catch you. The same reality that we talked about earlier in the week still exists. In terms of the Metro, Pittsburgh at 70, Islanders at 69, Columbus at 65, Washington at 65. All you got to do is be better than 2 of them. That's it. And they can't take your spot. They also are 7 points ahead of Ottawa. I think it's a pretty darn good cushion. They are 1 point ahead of Boston, 2 back of Montreal, 2 back of Detroit, who they have slowly been making up ground on little by little here. They have a game in hand on the Red Wings, by the way. So You win that game in hand. You have the regulation wins. You are ahead of them for top 3 in the division. There are so many paths to making it and so few paths to missing. It could happen. The odds right now say, Evolving Hockey, a site I use a lot, has the Sabres at 90.4% to make the postseason with a 100-point projection. That to me tells all. They should make it. It would take an epic collapse for them to miss. Still 10%. Like 10% is not 0.5%. It's not 1%. It's 10. So they have to do some work, but they'd have to do a lot of work on the negative context to actually miss. They are still in great shape. And I had someone point out earlier today, hey, their schedule is one of the toughest that's remaining because, they have a lot of their tough games, 3 games left against Tampa, for instance. Well, one, by the way, Tampa and some other teams like them, Dallas is on their schedule again. These teams might have less to play for the later and later the season goes because they won't be fighting for positioning anymore because they're going to start clinching things at some point. Like Dallas, just for example, that's the last game of the year. Wednesday, April 15th, Sabres hosting the Stars. Dallas is not going to play anybody in that game. And that's just one game out of 25. But Dallas isn't going to play anybody in that game. They're going to have second or third clinched, and they're going to be getting ready for the playoffs. So, yeah, that will push your strength of schedule higher to look harder, but it's not. That's going to be an easier game than what it might look like on paper. So it's just one example of you can't always just take that, at face value. And also, the Sabres have company. All the other Atlantic teams are right around them. Detroit is like the 3rd hardest schedule in the league. Toronto's right there with you. Not that they're, super close right now. They are 7 back of the Sabres. Ottawa is right there. Montreal, Montreal's the same as the Sabres. All the strength of schedule stuff you can just wash out, I think. Saw that point made earlier. So that's 2. Don't think that's a reason to be worried. The other thing is that lineup last night that played against the Penguins, that has everybody feeling just a little bit down about them right now. That lineup is not the lineup that I am expecting at all when they come out of the break. If you told me that's their lineup for the rest of the year, I'd be really worried. And I would think 10% is low for missing the playoffs. It should be higher than that. And part of that is there are 3 guys at least in that lineup last night that you do not want in your lineup on a night-to-night basis. Isak Rosen, he just doesn't give you anything. 4th line role, 3rd line role, scoring role. He had a couple of nice games earlier in the year. Any other time in his career that he's been called up does not look like an NHL player. He's only in because you have 5 forwards that are injured. Konsta Helenius flashed early, looked great in that one period earlier on. He's not ready for the NHL. I think it's clear as day. He is not making an impact. He looks a little bit overwhelmed. He looks a little bit lost physically and hesitant to make some plays that I'm sure he can make in the AHL. I think, is going to be a really good player. He's very talented, but he's not ready for this. Not yet. But why is he in there? Injuries. Tyson Kozak. I've not been loving Kozak lately. He's a 4th liner. It's not really that big a deal, but I like Josh Dunn better when he was healthy. Even Greenway sometimes, even though I haven't loved Greenway this year, I've liked better. And maybe Justin Danforth could give you more. I don't know. Don't see the need to have Kozak in your lineup when everybody's healthy either. When you come back, Norris should be in. Benson should be in. Fingers crossed someday here, Kulik could come back. Maybe Dunn could come back. Danforth could come back as a 4th liner. Like, they should be healthier at least by 2 up front. And then there's the blue line. And we'll get to that a little bit when we talk about things that they need. I mean, Connor Timmins is the one guy that you are still waiting on. And we'll see if he's able to come back. I mean, broken leg, but they're talking like he will return at some point this year. So maybe that helps them a little bit on the 3rd pairing. So that's the other reason I'm not really that upset, or dissatisfied with where they're at. I don't think that team that played Pittsburgh is the one that you're going to see down the stretch. That doesn't even talk about guys they could trade for. And we'll talk about that when we return. So anyways, to summarize, big picture, they're at 90.4% to make it. They're not in yet, but they're in great shape, and I'm feeling good about how the whole thing is really going here. All right, what about what they need? Kind of a preview of our next couple episodes, in which we'll get into more specifics about certain players on other teams and who's going to be selling. But I've got a couple of concepts I want to throw by everybody for what I do think the Sabres need to add. That's coming up here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Indeed. If you're ever hiring someone and, they look good on paper, but they weren't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who will truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed's all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on the other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs will put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs will help your listings stand out and reach quality candidates a lot faster. Sponsored jobs will boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that'll make a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored job posting directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement that it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres fall to Pittsburgh, 70 points, first wildcard spot, 90% to make the playoffs, according to Evolving Hockey. And most other sites, I would say, are right around the same, or maybe just a little bit lower. Somewhere in the 80s, I think, actually, is probably where you find most sites. But Evolving Hockey, who I like, has them at 90%. By the way, one other thing about that, if they played 500 hockey the rest of the way, 500 hockey. And I think they're better than that. 500 hockey is actually not that good, right? They had 25 points in 25 games. They'd have roughly a 60% chance to make the postseason. And that is without playing well at all down the stretch. And I think they'll be better than that. And it's not just because of the health that I mentioned. I didn't mention Luukkonen, by the way, coming back, hopefully. It's also potential moves. I would expect the Sabres are going to add something at the trade deadline. What could they add? What types of players they could add? The certain players they'll add, we'll talk about in our next couple of episodes. But just to preview that, last night gave you a little look at the things I think they need to address. I'll start on the back end. I believe one thing they need to add is depth on the blue line. And last night was an example of that. And there's, I think, more reasons even beyond that. Michael Kesselring right now is not giving the Sabres anything. He's definitely playing through injury. There is no doubt about that. He's playing through stuff. He's trying. Lindy talked a little bit about a mental part of his game too that they're trying to figure out. And, Paul Hamilton mentioned this with us on WGR this morning, that he also might be adjusting to being in a hockey town where he's can be criticized. Although, when I heard that, I thought, how much is he really being criticized? People are pointing out he's not playing well, but the team's been winning, and he also hasn't been in the lineup that much. So it's not like we're walking around every day and talking about how bad Michael Kesselring has been. Once in a while, you're pointing out that he's struggling, but I think the injury has been attached to it. So I hope that's not the case, because that, man, like that, there hasn't really been that much criticism of Michael Kesselring, but no doubt he's not playing well. And that's not even just the offense. I mean, he has one measly point on the season. It was a secondary assist on that meaningless tuck goal at the end of the Islanders game after the Sabres had already scored an empty netter. So he's given them nothing. And he's playing less than 10 minutes a night in a lot of these games. Bryson, obviously last night, completely fallen out of the rotation after a bad couple of periods. Zach Metsa, I don't mind. I think he's actually been decent. They're outscoring opponents 16-2 when he's on the ice. I think he's pretty composed at getting the puck out of his own end. But he might not be struggling as much as the other two, but he would be grouped in with this point for me. Right now, the Sabres are leaning heavily on their top four defensemen. Dahlin, Samuelsson, Byram, Power are all playing a ton of minutes. It's not just you can't trust the third pair. It's also, what do you do if something happens to somebody in that top four? You need to protect yourself from injury. And if somebody got injured up there, and I've suddenly got a 20-minute role that I have to replace, there is nobody in the building right now that I think is near capable of taking that on. Not Kesselring right now, the way he's playing. Hopefully 20 days off, him getting a little healthier, he could get to that point. I think he's capable of it, but he hasn't given you any evidence yet that he's ready to do it. And Bryson and Metza are not the type of defenseman you want to do that with. Bring in somebody else. Add a third pair defenseman that can both give you 14 to 16 good minutes a night, not get killed in his own end, maybe some size, and also give you a plan B in case somebody gets hurt up high. Somebody that won't get destroyed as much as I would assume those three guys we just talked about would. Now, I had this written down to talk about, and literally right before I started recording here, there was a tweet that I saw of something Elliot Friedman said on 32 Thoughts today, which pertains to the trade deadline. And he said, I could see them adding, talking about the Sabres, a beefier blue liner if possible. Now, in fact, he wrote it today and didn't do it in the podcast. So I'll do this live too and react with you. Friedman talking about the defenseman. I'm going to get here and hope that he mentioned a certain name. There is one defenseman that we'll talk about more in depth next week that sounds like is going to be traded and I think fits the type of player that we're talking about. Logan Stanley. Logan Stanley of the Winnipeg Jets. He's a 6'7", 15-minute-a-night defenseman. He's got 9 goals on the year. Advanced numbers are okay, not amazing. I think he's a guy that I could see making sense for the Sabres. I don't think he'd be that expensive either. He's like $1.5 million. Would be an upgrade on your third pair. So Friedman, okay, here it is. Some discussion between the Sabres and Tuck, not enough to get a deal done. They have indicated they are not interested in anything that makes the team worse. That's, I think, obvious. And then he says just that. I could see them adding a beefier blue liner if possible. And I guess that's it. So Logan Stanley, name to keep an eye on, and we'll talk about him and other options coming up next week. The other thing the Sabres need to add is power play. Just they have to. They have to add on the power play. I know they've scored in 6 games in a row on the power play, but that's not a dangerous unit. Shift to shift, power play to power play, they don't have it. They don't have the answers. And I don't have any confidence that they would score in a playoff series on the man advantage. I will expand on this more next week, but I've decided, I think over now 3 seasons of sample size and a terrible shooting percentage and a power play that can't get rolling, I've decided it's no longer a good idea to have a power play that runs through Tage Thompson. Simple fact of the matter. Nothing against Tage Thompson. I think he's an amazing hockey player that deserves to be on Team USA. And I'm telling you right now, if he gets scratched next week by Team USA, I'm going to lose it. He is one of the best. In fact, I think you could argue in the last 2 seasons, he is the best goal scorer at even strength in the league. He led the league last year with 37. He is second in the NHL this year with 25. 62 even strength goals over 2 years. He is unbelievable at 5-on-5. How much longer do we need to see him not be excellent on the power play to realize he's not a good power play player? Sometimes that happens to guys. He had the one monster year in 22-23. Yes, he did. But since then, he has 21 power play goals to 80 even strength. Quadruple the amount of even strength goals. I think this idea that the whole power play just goes Dahlin and Tage back and forth and everything fires through them, it doesn't work. And I would like to see them try something else. I don't want to need to take Tage off the unit, but maybe flip him to the other side. The guy I'm going to get into a lot next week that I'm starting to fall in love with as an idea, I don't know if this team is going to sell because they're only 4 points out of a playoff spot, is Steven Stamkos. Stamkos is starting to become like a dream to me because that guy is one of the, from the spot that Tage plays, that left faceoff circle on your right-hand shot. So again, Tage would have to move to his offhand for this. Stamkos is one of the best power play players from that spot in league history. And he is still excellent. 41 goal pace this year. 9 goals on the power play. He's had double-digit power play goals every year of his career that he's played more than 17 games. He's excellent on the man advantage and still is a great player and an all-around great player. Versatility to play all throughout the lineup. Well, I don't know how realistic he is, though, because, again, full no movement clause. Have the Sabres done enough to get off, those types of lists? Is Nashville want to sell at all? What's their GM situation after Barry Trotz's retired? So more on him next week. But like that type of idea. Moving Tage to a different spot, not being afraid to do that, and having the power play run through somebody else. Because if you brought in Steven Stamkos, Tage is on the unit, Dahlin's on the unit, but that power play runs through Stamkos if you were to do that. A lot more to complicated parts to get into on him as an idea, but he could be moved. All right, that'll be next week. So power play and depth defenseman. That's where I'm at for this team right now. We'll talk about specific guys. We mentioned 2 guys there. More in depth on them. And I got a bunch of other names to get to when we roll through some of those ideas next week. We'll also talk Olympics next week. And we'll start having fun with Team USA. They don't have hard games at the start because their group is so easy. Like, they'll play Germany. Germany could push them a little bit, but Latvia, Denmark, like, they should have an easy time making it through the group stage, but we'll see. That's next week. Trade deadline stuff, Coach of the Year stuff, a lot to get to. If you want to get in a comment or a question during the weekend or during this time the Sabres are off, be sure to get to our Discord. Sign up. Go to LockedOnSabres.supercast.com. You also get ad-free versions of this show, becoming a part of our Everydayers Club. We will talk to you on Monday here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network.